Hi Carey kids, it's Tom here. I've just been thinking about some impossible things. Things which I seen and I didn't even believe it had happened. Downstairs in my lounge there's a picture on the wall of one of these occasions. Something impossible happening. England winning a sporting event. And when I saw it happen, I couldn't believe it. And now every time I see the picture, I think, wow, that was incredible. Now, today in our Carey Kids lesson, we're continuing to hear about Esther. And we're actually going to hear about something far more incredible than any sporting event. And that's God helping his people. God saving his people when things, without him, would have gone very, very wrong indeed. So what's happened in the story so far? Well, you're joining in part 3. The first part, as told by Abigail, we heard about Esther, a Jewish girl who unexpectedly became queen of the Persian Empire. That's one of the largest empires there was at the time. And we also learned about her cousin Mordecai, who was also promoted to another one of the most important officials in the land. And because of this, a man called Haman, who didn't like the Jews very much at all, tricked the king into writing a law which meant that the enemies of the Jews could attack the Jews, and he wanted to wipe the Jews out of the empire altogether. And we learnt through that God was actually working long before this situation happened, because God had put Esther and Mordecai in the right place at the right time. Then in the second part, Graham taught us about God's perfect timing and how through his perfect timing, Esther was able to show the king that Haman was an enemy, an evil man, and that he was using the king to pursue his own jealousy and his greed. And when the king found out about this, he punished Haman. He executed him in the way that Haman had planned for Mordecai to be executed. A complete reversal. Something impossible which only God could have brought about. And that's where the story left. The king had realised what this new law was all about. He was horrified by it. He got rid of Haman, the man who'd brought it about. But we're left right there. So, what happened next? Well, Haman's gone. Who do you think was put in Haman's place? That's right, Mordecai. He was promoted to the highest official in the land. And with that, the Bible says, we're reading from chapter 8 for reference, all the way through to chapter 10 in the book of Esther, that Mordecai was given the king's signet ring. Doesn't sound like much, but with that came the power to write new laws for the entire empire. But we've still got the problem of this evil law. I don't know if you remember, but Abigail taught us in the first part that in this empire, in this land, if a law had been written, it could not be rewritten, not even by the king himself. So Esther's pleading with the king to change this law, but the king says, there's nothing I can do. I cannot change it. But he did say, Mordecai, I've given you the power to write new laws. Use that power to protect and save the Jewish people. So you can see that Mordecai was in the right place at the right time. God had put him in a position of power so that he could save the Jewish people. Wow. And so the Bible tells us that Mordecai wrote this new law, this law which said that the Jewish people, when they were attacked, could defend themselves. And this decree and this law was sent out throughout the whole empire, right from India all the way to Kush. Now, I think a map might be helpful here again. I've got one here somewhere. Here it is. Turn to the right page. Now, can you see this? It's a very zoomed in map of a certain part of the world. Maybe if you look at an atlas, you'll be able to find it yourself. For a hint, here is Greece at the top, the Mediterranean Sea. On here I've drawn out the empire of the Persians. And as you can see, it's enormous, stretching from India right over here, all the way down to Kush, which is in Africa, near Ethiopia today. And here is Susa, the city where Esther, Mordecai, and the king were. So how did this new law get from that city right in the middle all the way to the different parts of the empire? You couldn't ring anyone, couldn't send an email, but what they did is they got the fastest horses they had. And using these horses, messengers from Susa took the new law all the way throughout the empire. This law was written in all the different languages of the empire, saying, as I said before, that the Jewish people have a right to defend themselves on the day when the previous law said that others, their enemies, could attack them. Now, how do you think the Jewish people in the other cities of the empire felt when they heard this news? Before, they'd been so sorrowful and afraid and frightened because they knew this day was coming when their enemies would attack them. But now this new law comes through saying, you have the right to defend yourselves. There was hope. They were so filled with joy. The Bible tells us that they held a huge celebration to celebrate the fact that God had saved them so unexpectedly and impossibly. Now, when the day came where the enemies of the Jews would attack them, they still attacked the Jews. But God was actually with the Jewish people in defending them again. He helped the Jewish people overcome their enemies. We're told that Haman's family were defeated, and thousands of other people who had gathered together to attack the Jews were also defeated. God was with them in every victory, in every city throughout the empire. And so the time came when the enemies of the Jews were completely defeated and they did not attack the Jews anymore. And so you can imagine that there was so much rejoicing amongst the Jewish people again, and they held another huge celebration to thank God for his deliverance. And Esther and Mordecai, who were, as you remember, in positions of power again, decided that it was right to remember how God had helped them every year. And they created a new festival. It was called Pura. And every year they remember how God turned their sorrow into rejoicing, how he delivered them from their enemies. So that is the story of Esther. We're told in chapter 10 towards the end that Mordecai became second in command to the king, and that because of that he was held in high esteem by everybody, and he used his position of power for good, to look after the welfare of the Jewish people. So what can we learn from this whole story? Well, firstly, we learn that just because God isn't mentioned by name doesn't mean that he's not there and that he's not working. I want to invite you to look in your life, in your family's life, and perhaps to think, how is God working for me? And secondly, we saw that when the Jews realised how God had saved them, they rejoiced and they were thankful and they praised God for his help and for his deliverance. So I want to invite you to do the same, to thank God for everything that he has done for you. And thirdly, it's a reminder to trust God, that he has everything in control, that he always keeps his promises, especially for his people.